Yeah, we're talking today on Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, and we're talking particularly on the sixth canto, which is, you could say, where things start to get serious. The seventh canto, most are probably familiar with the story of Prahlad Maharaj and Lord Nrsingadev, where everything is pure devotional service or nothing. It's like really where the rubber meets the road in terms of devotional service. And so the sixth canto is leading up to that, where we start to look at what is the actual potency of bhakti yoga, comparison with other forms of yoga like jnana yoga, karma yoga, gyan yoga. And so the sixth canto kicks off with the story of Ajamila, who is a Brahmana. And for those who may not be familiar with the story, he's a Brahmana who gets distracted while in the forest by a prostitute. And due to weakness of heart, he pursues her and ends up spending his life with her and gets completely degraded, lives off crime and gambling, and is engaged in intoxication. And he begets 10 children with this prostitute and really lives a life that is, you could say, easily in the mode of ignorance, right? Completely forgetting his Brahminical training and becoming completely covered by the material modes, right? The lower modes in particular, tamaguna, the mode of ignorance, darkness, destruction, right? And he's having children up until the age of 80, right? So when he is dying, he sees the Yamadutas coming for him due to his sinful life, and in a last desperate attempt to take shelter of his attachment, he calls out for his son's name, his youngest son, and his youngest son, his name is Narayan. And in that moment, the Vishnu Dutas come and they save him from the Yamadutas. That means instead of going to the hellish regions where he was heading, he actually is saved by chanting the name of Narayan, even though he wasn't even thinking of Narayan at the time. So that is an example of the power of chanting, right? You can literally save your life regardless of what your consciousness is at the moment. And Ajamil was cleared of his sins, had to take one other birth, and then went back to Godhead, right? So I was thinking I could just read the last shloka of the first chapter of Canto 6 and Prabhupada's purport, and then I'll speak a little bit on that. What are the lessons we can draw from this? How can we apply this in our life? Mainly not the way that Ajamil chose to live his life, but probably more the potency of what happened just as he was leaving his body, right? And then hopefully we can have, like, if there are any questions, I don't know how, I'm not so familiar with how to run Zoom meetings. Maybe write it in the chat, and Prajnath Gopal Prabhu, can you like keep an eye out if there are any questions? I'm happy to answer questions as we go along, because then I know that I'm talking about something that you're relating to. So, all right. So without further ado, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschavadeshataya Om Jnana Timiranda Shajanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tashmai Shri Guru Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karanayam Tadata Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Nishamya Mriyamanasha Mukato Harikirtanam Bhatur Nama Maharaja Parshada Sahasapatan. And the translation by Srila Prabhupada. My dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamil, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks, Hari Kirtanam Nishamya Patan Katam Bhuta Sha Bhartur Nama Bhuvataha. The order carriers of Lord Vishnu came because Ajamil had chanted the holy name of Narayan. They did not consider why he was chanting. While chanting the name of Narayana, Ajamil was actually thinking of his son, but simply because they heard Ajamil chanting the Lord's name, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately came for Ajamil's protection. Hari Kirtana is actually meant to glorify the holy name, form, pastimes, and qualities of the Lord. Ajamil, however, did not glorify the form, qualities, or paraphernalia of the Lord. He simply chanted the holy name. Nevertheless, that chanting was sufficient to cleanse him of all sinful activities. As soon as the Vishnu Dutas heard their master's name being chanted, they immediately came. In this regard, Srila Vijayadvaj Tirtha remarks, Anena putra sneham antarena prachinatrista balad udbhutaya bhakcha bhagavan nam sankirtanam kritam iti gyayate. Ajamil chanted the name of Narayan because of his excessive attachment to his son. Nevertheless, because of his past good fortune in having rendered devotional service to Narayan, he apparently chanted the holy name in full devotional service and without offenses. So that's an interesting, subtle point we have here, is that he is chanting the holy name. That's enough. And especially that he's chanting it offenselessly, like trying to take complete shelter of that name. He's not chanting it deliberately glorifying the Lord, which would be Shuddhanam, which would be pure devotional chanting. He's chanting it directed at his son. However, that's not a big problem, because how are we actually going to do anything else? Like, it's not like we're walking around in our daily lives literally seeing Krishna, like Arjuna is seeing Krishna on the battlefield in Kurukshetra, right? We're seeing Krishna by his energies, and we're aware that there is a higher power behind that. So because Ajamil is chanting in complete desperation and without any, you could say, ulterior motive, right? The 10 offenses are not really on his mind, what he can gain from it. He's literally, genuinely, just devotionally chanting to take shelter. And the only thing he can think of is his son, who happens to be named Narayana. That combination of the holy name and the complete surrender renders him exempt from his sinful activities, right? And so it's difficult to comprehend the power of chanting the holy names of the Lord, right? And we sometimes have, we sometimes hear the doubt come up that I'm not really, I don't feel like I'm in the right mindset to chant the holy name. I'm always being distracted by this, that, the other thing. And so maybe I should purify myself before I try to chant like 8 rounds or 16 rounds, you know, because that's like an hour or 2 hours. And that's not really the import or the purport of the scriptures. It's like the only way forward is to chant the holy name. And initially, in our conditioned state, we will chant it with either partial attention or even offenses, right? Thinking that, oh, I just got to get my rounds done. Who hasn't tried that? Like, oh, when is this round done? Is actually kind of offensive when you think of it. When when we hear that Krishna is non-different from his name, it's actually you're inviting Krishna in, and then you're really just waiting to be done with it. That's a strange behavior. If you imagine inviting a guest to your house and then looking at the watch all the time to wait, just waiting for him to leave again, right? So, but nevertheless, the simple fact that you are chanting the holy name purifies us of the tendency to be offensive when we chant. So we don't chant when we're pure. Like it's not that we become pure and then we chant. We chant and then we become pure, right? And then it is described also how the only remedy for actual nam aparat, like literally offense to the holy name, is chanting the holy name. There is no other atonement that we can do. A point that is described in detail earlier in this chapter is that we have so many more or less mundane forms of atonement. Now you have karmic atonement, which is just like you break the laws of the land and then you have to atone for it by some kind of punishment, described in Manu Samhita, that it doesn't actually uproot the seed of sin, right? It is the only reason that atonement is there on a social level is because other people are basically governed by fear. And so if they see someone breaking the laws of the land and then getting punished, they think, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get punished. But for the perpetrator, it doesn't actually it doesn't actually deliver them from the tendency for sinful activity, right? We have this dual binary way of thinking that if I go to work, I will get paid. If I do pious acts, I will be happy. If I perform sin, I can atone for it. And then you get back to where you were, but you still have the tendency to perform sin, and it's just a matter of time before it happens again, right? Another form of atonement, which is higher, is the development of knowledge, like the Jnana Kanda path, where developing the knowledge that actually pure straight up sense gratification, like running off with a prostitute and living a life full of intoxication and gambling and crime, it doesn't actually make you happy. There actually aren't any happy criminals. If you notice, they're all pretty messed up people and pretty miserable, right? So there's no reason for me to perform sinful activities. That's the definition of a sinful activity. It's not a term that's meant to shame and blame people. It just means things that don't work, right? The Vedic injunctions are Krishna's recipe for how to deal with his energies, so you don't get fried out. And so breaking those is just not going to work, right? It's better than trial and error, right? But it's still selfish, right? Like even the mode of goodness is still tinged with that sense of accomplishment or self, pride in your achievements. And you see that even extending up to mystic yogis who go through like the eightfold yoga system and pranayama and disconnecting the senses from the sense objects and then focusing on the supreme, and they enter into samadhi and develop these mystic cities where you can levitate and change your form and all of these things, and inevitably they become proud. One thing is, it's very, very difficult to control the mind, right? Described in Bhagavad Gita as it's as difficult as controlling a flame in the wind, because the mind is by nature flickering. That's what it does. The lungs breathe, the heart beats and pumps blood around, and the mind flickers. It's an internal organ, like our other. They're never passive. They always, the moment that your internal organs stop being active, you're dead, right? So the mind will flicker. And if you actually learn to control it, how are you not going to get proud? What an accomplishment. That's like the richest people in the world, the kings and and the great scholars, they cannot control their mind. If you can, then that sense of superiority will just boost your false ego and you fall down again. And that's really what we mean when we talk about the wheel of life, samsara, right? That you develop good qualities and you get good results, but then you become proud of those results. And then the contamination of your consciousness starts again. And you start to think about, how can I enjoy this position? Or why are people not giving me the respect that I deserve, so exalted as I am? And you go down again and you develop bad qualities, and then you get punished, right? Sinful activities, they just don't work. And then the reaction comes. And that purifies you again. And then you start getting good results. And then you go around and around and around. And this wheel, this samsara, is prevalent in karma kanda, jnana kanda, or jnana kanda, right? The only process that works is bhakti yoga, the path of devotional service, because when you get good results, you recognize it as a blessing of the Lord. And so instead of becoming proud, you actually become humble from it, right? And that's also why the distinction is made with Ajamila. It liberated him so that he could develop devotional service, but it didn't send him directly back to Godhead, right? Because only devotional service actually does that. And so you can see with Ajamila leading up to the 7th canto that even a life full of sin, right? That's why these stories are in Bhagavatam, because there's nobody who's lived a more wasted life, in a sense, than Ajamila. Like, he had all good things coming into this life, like Brahmana training and pure, very cultured, and then still just a moment's distraction, and then the rest of your life is just lived as a criminal, basically, right? So we should never feel that we are secure in the material world. It can happen to anyone. And the problem in his case was he just became complacent, right? Because of past contamination of false ego, he felt a little bit proud of his his position as a pure soul, and that's enough. That's enough that Maya will just find that little point where you're proud, and then offer you whatever it is that will ultimately lead to your downfall. And it happens to all of us multiple times a day, right? There's always that person, like I had it today. I was going on the overground home, and the door's open to the train, and this guy, he's coming out and he's kind of walking into me, and I have to like get out of the way. And for a little moment, I'm like, couldn't he just, like, what's wrong with him, right? That little thing is like, doesn't he know who I am? Doesn't he know what my position is? And it's not even formulated so specifically in your mind, but it's happening all of the time. And that's why we need a strong sadhana. We need to chant the holy name with attention and with devotion in order to mitigate that. That's like, we live in a gigantic brainwashing machine, the modern society, which is constantly telling us that we should live like Ajamila, right? Enjoy yourself. This is a free country. This is 2022 now, and it's been locked down, and you should go out and have fun and party, right? Or at least enjoy material benefits and stuff. And the problem with that is just accumulates contamination, right? So in looking at Ajamila's situation, a trap, you could say, could be, well, okay, but I don't actually have to be that serious right now, because you can see from his example is at the end of his life is he chants his son's name and Hari Bol. All of it is resolved. There's a couple of problems with that. One of them is that it's not like Ajamila was happy for the duration of his life, right? That's like, That's the Maya, that we think we can be happy like that. Well, it maybe it didn't work out for Ajamil. Maybe he was miserable, but surely I can be happy like this. And it's a fascinating thing that we see nobody in the history of existence has actually been happy that way, and yet we think somehow we can pull it off if I adjust this thing, or I maybe drink a little less, or maybe I don't know, I get a Porsche instead of a Ferrari. That'll make the difference, right? But no, it's the principle. It's the principle of trying to control and enjoy that is wrong, because ultimately the senses are never happy. That's one of the things that the people I work with, they're fairly successful. They're CEOs of companies, right? And they in many cases they have problems understanding, why am I not happy, right? And they actually in some cases feel guilty because they have so much that other people don't have, and still they're not happy, because they don't understand that happiness doesn't come from acquiring material assets. It comes from following the Vedic injunctions. That's the manual that is there, that Bhagavatam can be used for two purposes: either to enjoy life or to go back to Godhead, right? But even if you just follow for personal benefit, you can be, from a material perspective, relatively happy because you're self-controlled, you're in the mode of goodness, you're not exploiting too much. And so by material standards, it can be seen as a successful life. And yet we also understand that that all the material enjoyment that Indra has is just a fraction of a drop of the ocean of nectar that is devotional service. Is not even on the same level. You can't even measure it. So the argument that you can live like Ajamila and then just chant at the end of life is a very weak one. Why wouldn't you do it immediately, right? So that's why it's recommended. And then on top of that, we don't have the training that Ajamil has. Like, there are some Brahminical samskaras that brought out the Narayan, and the reason he called his son that name. And so there are some pure samskaras that at the end, when he realizes, oh my God, this is going really bad right now, and there doesn't seem to be a way out, he happens to chant the name of Narayan, right? And so I can speak for myself. I don't have a Vedic upbringing. I don't, I'm from Denmark. We're excellent at sense gratification. We're really good at it. We have money. We're like the subterranean heavenly planets. Kind of everything is opulent, and the buses run on time, and people are fairly polite. So there's a good chance that I won't spontaneously remember Narayan at the end of my life if I pursue that as a lifestyle, and hence I felt the need to literally transport myself to Mayapur and submerge myself in the training of a bhakti yogi, and in doing so experienced a sense of happiness that I had never known was available, right? So if we take our daily life at a little bit as the life, like our regular day is kind of a microcosm of Ajamil's life. We get up in the morning, maybe we have a little bit of sadhana, we do some chanting, we take a bath, we have some prasadam, and off we go to work. And it's just getting it done, and looking out for number one, and then we do some shopping, and then we have to get home to the kids, and it's not sinful. It's part of doing your duty, but it is a distraction, right? And so all good if we can do a little bit of spiritual activities towards the end of the day as well. But the thing is, Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada's teachings offer us even more than that, right? They offer us a way of connecting every aspect of our life with Krishna. That's what Krishna Lila really is. The 10th canto, the sunam bonum of the Bhagavatam, is is not sadhana. You know, in Krishna Lila, you don't see a lot of brahmacharis and sannyasis walking around chanting 100,000 names a day. You see regular activities going on, but with full devotion to Krishna, and that's where the second option from Bhagavatam really flourishes, is in its ability to spiritualize every single aspect of our lives, right? And that's what I try and train these people in, that I do in my work, is that one thing, we get them chanting and get them to experience, wow, this is amazing, right? And then we start switching everything around. They're cooking, they're dealing with the board members, their family members. It's not about you. But isn't it a little bit about me? No, it's not about you. It's about them. And getting out of that like burden of self that is related to the false ego, that's liberation. That's literally the definition of liberation, right? And the irony is that it strengthens your personality. If you've ever seen, and I'm sure you have, great devotees who have practiced rigorously for many years, you will see that their personality shines through very, very brightly, and they look younger than they are, and they're convincing. Just when they say something, it's just with conviction. And I remember in the beginning, I had this idea that when you became like a spiritual person, like your personality would disappear. You would just be like a blank slate, or some kind of Buddhist idea. I don't know, that all of this personal and qualities, that's Maya. But no, actually it's the other way around, that when we turn the false ego over to be real ego, that means servant of Krishna rather than a little imitator of Krishna, then the real personality actually shines, and we won't pick up so much stress, and we won't pick up any stress from whatever happens, whatever that guy from the overground that almost walked into me, right? And so that's really why the daily practice is recommended. It's not actually, even though it will make you happy, that's not why. It's because it purifies us, so that we are worthy to worship Krishna, right? That's the real purpose. And Krishna is so merciful that even if we chant for other purposes, it still purifies us because it's transcendental, right? So all of our material conditioning, it was just like a freight train running towards sense gratification. All of that is temporary. It will run out. That's the nature of material attachments. They run out. Like there comes a time where we just cannot derive any more taste from it, right? And so the spiritual practices by nature are eternal and ever expanding. And so whatever little thing we do, it never goes away. That's the great fortune of Ajamila, that whatever he had done in the past, it was still there. And when all of the material attachments collapsed, that came up, and that was enough, right? So our job, our purpose in life is to build on these spiritual and devotional qualities so that they will carry us back to Godhead, really, right? And so Ajamil is one of the extreme cases, but it's extreme because it really does show us very clearly there is no best of both worlds, right? There is no material life. Actually, material means dead. Life means spirit. So there is only spiritual life. Material life only leads to misery. And if we get too entangled in it, there are some Yamadutas ready to escort us to to a place that fits our consciousness, right? It's the punishment is not because Krishna wants us to feel bad. It's just because we're not listening. So he has to turn up the volume until we do listen, and then we can go back, right? I think at this point it's a good time to ask if there are any questions on this. at this point, like the distinction or anything else? Are we having anything, or should I just continue? I can continue also.
Perhaps you could tell us more about unintentional devotional service.
Yes, that's a good point.
Okay, so
yeah, so unintentional devotional service, right? That, how do we know what devotion is? How do we know Krishna? Krishna doesn't even know himself, right? So when we say unintentional devotional service, we don't need to look at it as like a binary. Again, is it intentional or unintentional? It's more like a gradual unveiling of what devotional service actually is. But anything that is in line with the Bhagavad process is devotional service. It is by definition. So chanting the holy name, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, taking prasadam, it is devotional service. It is direct communion with God, with Krishna, right? Whether we know it or not. Some of the indirect processes, like cleaning the temple, like all of the things we see in Krishna Lila, cooking for Krishna, or yeah, just living the Vedic life, it can be devotional or it cannot be, right? Depending on how we view it. But chanting Hare Krishna is always direct association with Krishna and will always develop devotional qualities, right? Simply because he is non-different from his name, and he does not, by definition, contact anything material. He's just not. That's the definition of material, is that it's somehow disconnected, external from Krishna. He's not involved. He's still controlling it, but personally, he's just not involved because we want to be in control. So fine, he doesn't have a false ego problem like we do, so he's fine with that, right? But associating with the holy name will always give devotional benefit, regardless of what sort of weird, mocking, or selfish or sense gratifying purpose we think we have with it. It will always bring us closer to becoming a devotee. That's why we have examples of, I know one devotee in particular who used to be like a skateboarder, and he used to, when the Hare Krishnas in Denmark were out on Harinam, he used to throw rocks at them, and really he was like really inimical towards them, because there was just something really annoying about how happy they were, and because he was miserable. And so what he would do is he would mock them and like imitate them. Hare Krishna, and before you know it, he's a devotee. He's initiated now, and is following 4 regs and chanting 16 rounds. And I met him in Mayapur, where he was staying for a long period of time. There is no defense against it, which is also why the Yuga Dharma is Harinam Sankirtan, and why we distribute prasadam. It's not to feed poor people. It is to make them into devotees, because there is no defense against it. It doesn't matter how inimical you are, it works, right? So the Vedic and the Pancharatric, it can be or it cannot be, but the Bhagavad, the chanting of the holy name, and taking prasad, and reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, it will develop devotional qualities, right? So in that sense, even though he was doing it like unknowingly or with the bad intentions, or it doesn't matter. It's still devotional service. And even like, because otherwise we can also say, like, when we're chanting Hare Krishna, are we really chanting Hare Krishna, like compared to someone like Haridas Thakur, right? But yeah, we are. It's just where we are on this, on the path, it will be more or less uncovered to us. But for Krishna, it's the holy name is the holy name, right? It's absolute. It's not. The point is, if you think that that's a difference, then basically what you're saying is that karma is above bhakti. Because of my karmic conditioning, bhakti won't work. So bhakti is dependent on karma. So that means karma is superior to bhakti. I have to get rid of my karma first, and then I can. No, bhakti is superior, and what's the word? Independent. That was the word I was looking for. It's independent of your karma, right? And we have plenty of examples of like Lord Rishabhadev, who's leading a life, various avaduts who are leading lives where you'd say, well, that doesn't look like what we would expect a great devotee, but they are pure devotees, right? So in that sense, even unintentionally chanting, and that's why also Raja Yatra is so important, right? Because we take the temple to the street, and people can watch it, and they are taking part in the rasa dance in a sense, right? That's kind of what's happening, right? Everyone's dancing, and you see it in London on Saturday nights. Parashuram and his crew goes out and does Harinam among all the drunk people, and you can see it. They join for a moment, and their consciousness completely changes. There's a different light in their eyes, and for that duration they're liberated. And so by some arrangement, they leave the Harinam again, and they go back to where's my cigarette, where's my beer, but for that duration of time, they're actually performing devotional service, and it'll never leave them. It essentially their material life is over. It's just a matter of time. So I hope that makes some sense. And we can also talk a little bit about, so how does that apply, like practically speaking, because that's all well and good, right? But how does it apply? Well, there are like steps we can take if we want to saturate our life with this. If we want to fully experience how glorious it actually is what we're doing, if we want to get out of this feeling of just getting the rounds done, or I really should be reading Bhagavatam, and I put my hand up, I'm guilty of that as well, is this Shravana Manana Nidijasana Kirtana, right? That Shravana, listen attentively. When you chant, listen to your own voice, right? It's easy to do. It's not about seeing a great big light or stopping the mind. Just listen to your own voice, right? When someone is speaking Bhagavatam, listen attentively, right? Then manana, when you have listened attentively, contemplate. What does this mean? Like, what does it mean that I'm sitting here chanting, right? What is my relationship with Krishna? What are my qualities? Where is my mind drawn to? Like, what are my natural attractions, and how do I connect them to Krishna? Where in Bhagavatam do I see these qualities that I have connected with Krishna? That helps make it real, and it helps us to see the Bhagavatam in real life when we walk out the door and just see life going on, because the material is just a reflection of the spiritual. It's exactly the same things that are going on, but it's just with a lot of self-centeredness in the material. That's the difference. But if we can contemplate and see what are the pure, the real, the transcendental manifestations of these contaminated manifestations that I see, it helps us to be Krishna conscious in every situation. And then, of course, Nidijasana application, then act on that, even if we have an inclination to cut corners, or we're lazy, or it's just been one of those days, or whatever it is. With the contemplation also comes the understanding that it doesn't actually benefit us to give ourselves a break from devotional service, and then it allows us to go that little extra for Krishna, right? Not too far, not burn yourself out trying to be a pure devotee from one moment to another, but just give it a little more than we think we can, or that we think we should. We often find afterwards, I'll be real honest with you. When Rajana Gopal asked me to do this talk, it was like last minute, and my first thought was, oh, I have to cook dinner, and I'm writing a commentary on some Nietzsche. I was really gonna, and I was Jeevani, my wife will laugh when she hears this. Like, I was sitting like this, can I do it? And the reason I was like this was because I knew I had to do it, because it would be more annoying for me if I said no than if I said yes. And here I am, and I'm so happy that I said yes. It's not a problem at all, and dinner will get made, and everything goes on. You know, it's just for some reason we have this initial like, oh, do I have to? And then when we look back on it, I know for certain that you all know it, right? When you look back on doing that little thing extra that we thought that, oh, I really don't have time. We're really happy that we did, and I'm not even done talking yet. I'm already happy that I did it, and I knew with the training I have, there's no way I can say no to this. So I have to just suck it up and call up Rajanath Gopal and say yes. And so my point is, don't overstretch. Don't stretch yourself too thin, because we are very small. We are 1/10,000th of the tip of a hair, and the world is very big. But we do have a tendency towards apathy and laziness. So going that little bit extra whenever we have the opportunity, and we will get realizations from it. We will become very strong spiritually from those little tiny incremental steps that we take. You know, we say we take one step, Krishna takes 10. So we do a little bit extra and are a little bit kinder than we even think is fair. Krishna will send mercy tenfold back, right? And then once that comes, right, so we have Shravanam, Mananam, Nijijasanam, listening attentively and humbly, contemplating how does it work in my life, how do I fit into this, and then application, pushing ourselves a little bit more than we think we should or need to. Then the realizations that come will be so glorious that we will have to share them with people. And that's kirtanam, that's preaching, that's enthusiastic chanting, Harinam. You know, we can share it with the world, and that allows the transcendental energy to flow, the chit shakti, you know, sat chit ananda. Everything actually runs on this knowledge shakti, chit shakti, spiritual shakti. And that energy always has to flow somewhere. So it flows through us. But if we just keep it in ourselves and just bhajananandi, yes, I'm happy, self-realized, it stops. It stops there. It can't flow anywhere. So actually giving Krishna consciousness to someone else allows it to flow more freely through us, and we will be more uplifted ourselves. Does that make sense, right? That the only way to really keep bhakti is to give it away. And then you will be more attentive in your hearing. You will be more clear in your contemplation. You will be more courageous in your application, and you will be more blissful in your sharing of this amazing process that we have. And when we feel low and when we fall down and all that, just remember Ajamila. Just one name. One name is enough to eradicate all your sin and all your ego and all of that. That's how powerful this is, right? So I hope that works. What did I see a question from Mittal, Haribol Mittal Prabhu? What lessons can we take away from Ajamila's life? Don't be a nonsense, chant Hare Krishna. That's the short version, really, right? And there is danger at every step. It doesn't matter how pious you are, how well situated you are. You go to temple every day or once a week or once a month or whatever it is, and you have a pious house, and it really just takes a moment. Maya is really good at her job. She knows all of our little weaknesses, and so if it could happen to Ajamil, it can surely happen to us. And so we should be careful about how we indulge in our thinking, right? Because it plants little seeds, just like bhakti plants seeds of devotion. Maya will help us plant seeds of material attachment, right? and it can go bad real quick, you know. So that would, but again, keep chanting, right? Because that was what saved Ajamil towards the end. He chanted the names of the Lord, and that's sufficient. So chant the holy names of the Lord, but if it is so powerful that it can save someone like Ajamil from a lifetime of sin, imagine what it can do if we chant every day, right? Imagine the potency that we're actually dealing with here, and the bliss. I've had recently some people, clients that I've introduced to chanting, and especially one of them, seeing the transformation that it happened in him in a very short time is just mind-blowing for us, because we're used to it. There, you know, sometimes it's also in the first canto, in the story of Narada Muni, that Krishna shows himself and then he goes away because now there's work to be done. And I had that experience also initially, that very early in my chanting career, I had it was like bhava, like a very, very intense, blissful experience that I've never had in the same way since. But I'm always chasing it. I guess it's kind of like a heroin addict, always chasing that first high. So I'm always thinking about, I'm so attached to that feeling, that, and I've had little glimpses, but just reminding each other, which is what we're doing now, right? Reminding each other of just how beautiful and strong and potent this process is. That's also a lesson that we can learn from the story of Ajamil, right? That, wow, he really messed up his life, and yet on his deathbed he chanted one name, and it wasn't even directed at the Lord, and yet all of that is just negated in that one name. And the Yamadutas, they have no business anymore. That's how powerful it is, right? So, and it's readily available right now. Yeah, I hope that works. Anything else we have coming up? Rajanath, any comments? Do you have anything you think? Sometimes I go off on tangents and I forget to cover like essential points. So if there's anything you feel like I've neglected.
Not that comes to mind. I'm just thinking whether there is anything.
If anyone else has a comment, or even like an experience from their own life that relates, more than welcome to come in. Okay. Everyone is completely blissed out and levitating right now. But it's interesting. Okay, I can just waffle a little bit, but it's interesting to see also, this is one thing that is not always brought out, is how the Bhagavatam is a progression from the first canto and onwards, and seeing that how it gets closer and closer to the point, right? That there is only bhakti. There is no other process. Like, other processes are only defined by it's a subsection of bhakti that is becoming its own like philosophy. So like karma yoga is like just bhakti where overemphasis on work, right, because of attachment, or jnana yoga, overemphasis on like self-realization and speculation because you're attached to that. Jnana yoga, overemphasizing the meditative aspect, right, and not the emotional outpouring of love, right? But they're all just elements of bhakti. So the yoga ladder is really just getting closer and closer to the real thing. And you can see here, when we go on from 7th canto, we're only talking devotional service. There's no secondary and connecting the secondary, and how to, like 4th canto, how to do society, or 3rd canto, how to connect attachments to uplift yourself. No, it's pure devotional service is the only thing that actually works. And whenever anything karmically works or anything intellectually works, it is actually the devotion that runs it. That's the chit shakti, is actually a we call it the knowledge, but true knowledge is bhakti, right? That is described in Bhagavad Gita also, that knowledge that is not connected with Krishna is ignorance. It may mechanically work out, but you won't get what you want, right? It'll be tinged by passion, and passion leads to ignorance, and ignorance is suffering, right? So we see in Ajamila's life that it's very extreme, right? It's a lifetime of sin that is eradicated by one name. Okay, what do we have? It feels like Srila Prabhupada is saving us all, like the Vishnuduta saved Ajamil. Yes, that's a very, very good point. That's a very good point. We are heading, sounds so dramatic. It is dramatic. We're heading towards hell. And Prabhupada came. There's this story of Brahmananda, who at one point made a mistake and was like punished by Prabhupada because he said he began to think that Prabhupada was God, that he was Krishna, and Prabhupada really didn't like that because that's like a Mayavad contamination, right? But he atoned, and he developed true bhakti. And at one point, a journalist asked him, "So, is Prabhupada God?" And Brahmananda said, "No, Prabhupada is not God. I made that mistake earlier in my life." And then he said something that I'll never forget hearing. He said, "No, Prabhupada is better than God. Because Prabhupada came to the Bowery district and saved me. Krishna didn't do that." Right? And I'm almost tearing up when I hear that, because that's my story as well. I had absolutely no qualification for anything remotely close to devotional service. And Prabhupada just went out against all rhyme or reason, or even against shastric injunctions that a sannyasi should not cross the ocean and all of that. His god brothers didn't help him, and he landed in the bloody Bower district. There's no story better than Prabhupada's. Like it's fully on the level of the story of the Bhagavatam. It's just remarkable what he went through, and he saved all of us. Like we are Ajamila, and Prabhupada is like the Vishnudutas that come and say, "No, you can come. You can come. We have no qualification. Prabhupada has all the qualification." And as long as we remember that, we can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. That's really what it is. It's that simple. It's that beautiful. And yeah, thank you for that. That was really nice point.